A dash of mystery, a sparkle of magic, and all things cozy. Join your host, Elle Hartford, for Cozy Alchemy, a proud member of the Authors on the Air network. Hello and welcome to Cozy Alchemy, the podcast all about cozy Arthurian books. I'm Elle, and my guest today is John Glynn, author of The Lost Book of Lancelot, which we will get to in just a minute. But first, John is going to start us off with a game of two truths and a lie.
Great. So, the first statement is I can make spaghetti bolognese from scratch.
Okay.
The second, a psychic told me what book I would write. And the third is that I once won a belly flop contest. So which is it, Elle?
Okay. And I know immediately. I'm going to say the third because I'm hoping that's not true, and I'm really hoping that the other two are true. So that's my guess, the third one.
So I hate to break it to you. Well, I actually, when I was 5, I did win the Bliss Pool belly flop contest at our town pool. So that was actually a truth. And
was it worth it?
It was absolutely, I still to this day, like, it was probably like my crowning achievement in life. It was fully worth it. But okay. The lie is that I cannot make spaghetti bolognese from scratch. I can't make anything from scratch. I can barely boil water. But it's true that a psychic did tell me the book that I was writing. I hadn't told anyone the idea of this project that I was working on, which is The Lost Book of Lancelot, which we'll talk about. And I had a psychic reading, and she told me pretty much exactly what I was working on while I was working on it, which I thought was pretty amazing.
That's impressive. Yeah. Did she tell you anything extra, like, and it's going to be a #1 bestseller or anything like it?
She did. She told me to stick with it. She said, stick with it, that good things were going to happen. So it brought me to this podcast. So she was right.
There you go. Yeah. It's all in your perspective. I appreciate, we can't all have all the skills, right? So very good at belly flopping, not so good at cooking.
Not so good at cooking. Yeah.
Things even out, true. I guess. I have a follow-up question, though, about the psychic. Were other friends, were people with you? Like, did this end up, kind of breaking the news to people in your life?
This was a private reading. So she was just telling me this directly to me. But of course, after the fact, I did tell people, that I got this reading, and they were kind of blown away. So
nice. All right. Oh, well, okay. And I could ask more, but we will try to be orderly. We'll go in order as much as we can. So your book, The Lost Book of Lancelot, will have just come out by the time this airs. So can you tell us a little bit about it to get us started?
Yeah, sure. So it is a retelling of Lancelot's story and his place in Arthurian legend. But I've been describing it lately as like a heated rivalry in King Arthur's court. I drew on some actual queer threads, though, of Arthurian lore to tell the story. And can I like geek out for a minute? Is that okay?
Please,
Permission to geek out. So
granted.
If you go really far back to the 13th century, there's this old French prose version of Arthurian legend. It's known as the Vulgate cycle, and it's like, it spans 10 volumes. It's thousands of pages long. It's really daunting. But in the Lancelot section, you'll find this queer-coded love story between Lancelot and a fellow knight named Galhoot. And so my goal was to kind of bring that love story back to the forefront and sort of refashion the other familiar beats of Lancelot's story in like a fresh way. But basically, if you are an Arthurian legend fan, I wanted to do right by you. But if you've never really stepped foot into this world, if you like only have like a passing knowledge of Camelot or King Arthur, anything like that, I wanted to give those readers too like a very comfortable access point. So I was trying to kind of like make it work for both.
Nice. Yeah. Well, and okay, we're 5 minutes in and we're going to be derailed because I really want to follow up on that. Because podcast listeners, longtime podcast listeners will know I write a series that is retold fairy tales. So I struggle with exactly this quite a lot. Like, you know, as you're diving into, and it's the same thing too, where there will be many different versions of the same story. It'll, you know, come from different cultures, whatever, different writers. So that's a hard balance, right? Like how did you do that?
Oh my gosh. Well, so it just took a lot of reading, first of all. You know, I'm not an academic. I'm not, you know, a medievalist. So I kind of had to give myself a crash course in Arthurian literature and just read as much as I could about Lancelot and the world he occupied and sort of really get a sense of the landscape and the tradition that I was writing into. But I think one of the things that kind of gave me confidence is that if you look back, like unlike say like the Odyssey, where there's like Homer's The Odyssey, Arthurian legend's really cool because there's like no one single source text. There's so many different versions, and certainly some versions are more widely read than others, but you can't really trace it back to just like one specific version. Even the Vulgate cycle, which is in a lot of ways foundational, was drawing on other works of the time. And the reason why this book is called The Lost Book of Lancelot is because they say that like something like only 10% of Arthurian legend actually survived in manuscript form. So that means fun. Like if you think about that, like there was so much circulating at the time about it was almost like it was like the Marvel Cinematic Universe of medieval times, right?
Yeah.
And so that the title was sort of an ode to that. But I think knowing that like people have been reworking these stories since the beginning, you know, that a patron would pay them to write a story, and a writer would write it to, you know, the specifications of their patron, or to capture specific values, or to put forth like an agenda, whatever the case may be. But like it kind of, knowing that, it was like, all right, game on. I can kind of take this and make it my own too.
I love that. And it's so true. It's so true.
Right?
Yeah. You are just joining a very long, very honored tradition.
Exactly.
Yeah. But kind of on that note, like, in your author's note at the end of the book, you talk about a little bit of like where this came from and all of the research that you did. And you talk about your inspiration having started back in the days of Blockbuster, which I love. And then, of course, going into all the research that you mentioned and like a lot of different doubts and things that came up in between. So I guess my big question from that was why? Like, what drew you into the lore to begin with, and what kept you working on it?
Yeah. Oh, man. Remember Blockbuster? I feel like life was just so much better then. Yeah, and it really, like, when I do think about it, that probably was my very first touch point with Arthurian legend, was Disney's The Sword in the Stone, right? And, you know, from there it was... in high school, T.H. White and a little Sir Thomas Malory, some Tennyson, Gawain and the Green Knight. And
a nice smattering in there.
A smattering. Yeah. But even then, you know, that was sort of just barely scraping the surface, I learned when for me, it was this story, learning about Lancelot and Gale Hoot, that I couldn't shake the idea of this, that there was this amazing sort of queer-coded story. And let me just preface that by saying, it's not like I discovered this, right? It's not like I was like going through the archives of like tearing through the Vulgate cycle. It was like, oh my gosh, look at this queer love story that no one has ever heard. Like there's tons of scholarly work written about Lancelot and Gale Hoot. Like I did not discover it, but I kept thinking, I had read Song of Achilles and I loved that book so much. And it got me thinking, like, what other queer love stories have always been with us, just sort of lurking in plain sight, right?
Yeah.
And that really, and then when I found Lancelot and Gale Hoot's story, I thought, like, this could be such a cool novel, but I really, it took me a long time to convince myself that I was writing anything, really. Like, I was doing this research and then kind of in little bits and pieces, just like trying out scenes and testing out and trying to find the voice and, a potential arc. And then slowly but surely the pages stacked up and I had something resembling a draft, but it really, in terms of the doubts, it really, I had to convince myself that, like, no one's ever going to see this, right? That, like, I'm doing this just for me. And I had to liberate myself basically from, like, an implied audience, from anyone other than, like, I wanted to kind of just prove it to myself that I could do it in the way that, like, if you're running a race or something and you're trying for your personal best, right? It has nothing to do with anyone else. It just has to do with, like, you. And when I did that, like, it became fun. It was like, wait, I can actually, like, step into this world and, like, have a little bit of an escape hatch from reality for, a couple hours at a time. And I sort of was able to tap back into that more, like, primal, fun, very just, like, pure form of writing, I guess. Yeah. And
now, I had a note to ask you later, but I'm going to ask you now, because you've started out, I know. For listeners, we were joking before we began that today is just a little bit haywire. And so we're just embracing that. So you have written a memoir. Your previously published book was a memoir. Were you working on the two at the same time? Like, did it overlap? Like, was it like you're working on one and then you're having fun with the other sort of thing?
Oh my gosh, like, not at all. No. So,
wow.
Like,
okay.
Yeah. So there was, like, a gap between them. So I wrote my memoir's called Out East, and it's about a summer I spent in Montauk, which is this beach community at the very end of Long Island. I was in a share house with, like, 30 other people, and I fell in love with a guy for the first time. So it was sort of a coming out story and about that, like, first love and figuring yourself out, basically. And I wrote that book in like, what I realize now was, like, the first section, especially, I wrote almost in a white heat. Like, I wrote it very quickly. And the rest of it really did sort of unspool at a pretty quick pace because I had such a sharp vision in my mind. The scope of it was always just going to be set over one summer. I knew the characters. They were my friends and my family. Yeah. So I had all of that in place. And I wrote that book, and then it came out in 2019, and then the pandemic hit, and then I had no creative energy at all. I was just like, I'd finish my workday and be like, all right, what's on Netflix? Like, I just, like, couldn't really get my writing mojo going until, it really wasn't until 2021 when I was, like, ready to kind of, like, get back into a writing groove. And that's when I started sort of delving back into this idea. But
okay.
oh man, fiction was so much. It was so much harder for me. And I don't know if that's true for everyone, but for me, this book was a lot. It was a lot harder because even though there was all this source material, I still felt like I really had to, in some ways, build the plot out from scratch because, you know, there are countless different directions and shapes that the story could have taken.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, that's so funny. You've probably heard that there's like a piece of, I don't know, sage wisdom out there in the author world that the first book you write is often somewhat autobiographical. So, like, you just embraced that.
Literally.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is good. You just, you know, just like make that the point of it. And then yeah, expand from there, I guess.
But then I was like, you know what? I wrote about people I know and luckily they still talk to me. I'm still friends with them.
That's good, yeah.
Everyone was very cool about it. It was like, I'm not gonna press my luck. I'm gonna swing the opposite way. We're going full blown fantasy for this next book. So
nice. Well, okay. On that note, we'll get back on track because I did want to ask you about the historical research, and you mentioned like you're having to teach yourself a lot as you go along, and in your author note you mentioned different scholars that you reached out to. What are some of the revelations that came up for you with like this whole new setting?
Oh my gosh! Well, okay, this is like such an embarrassing question, Elle, because you're now gonna realize like how over my skis I was with this project. But like, yeah, it really, like, this was the big part of my hang up, was that I didn't have that like academic foregrounding going into this. So I did read a lot. I read a lot in the Arthurian world. I read a lot of books about medieval times in general. I did so much Googling, just to try and like read scholarly papers too that like engage with these texts in interesting ways. But like still and yet, I finished a draft and then I realized I needed that lens. I needed someone with that expertise to read it. So I commissioned an academic to give it a read. So I talked to this medievalist, and the things that she, like the errors that I had in like earlier drafts they're so embarrassing.
I have to know.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah. So like, all right, like for example, where do you think the dungeon is in a castle? It's like
at the bottom, right?
It's in the basement, right?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Nope. No, they keep the prisoners up in the tower, not chained in the basement, right? Like every other movie. So that I totally got that wrong. Like in one scene, like Lancelot's eating dinner and he sets down his fork. Nope, not even close. We do not have forks at all. We've got spoons, knives, but you're eating with your hands and trencher, like, but no, you're not, no forks. Like, there was probably the worst one though, like, this was an error that, like, as I was writing, I caught myself. It was just so bad, but, like, they're in, like, a dark hall, and Lancelot... he needs to light a candle, and so like he like takes a match and lights a candle, and like we aren't even like, I might as well have given him an iPhone flashlight to shine. Like, we aren't even remotely close to matches at this time. And like that, even to me, that like I was like, wait a minute, I don't think something about this, and I checked and was like, yeah, this is so wrong. Yeah. So anyway, this is like, thankfully this medievalist, she's so wonderful, Becky Lartigue from Springfield College, she gave it a really thorough read and caught a lot of the things that I missed, and a lot of the things too, just as I learned more and more, I caught in revisions myself before I got Becky's eyes on it. But oh man, yes, the answer is yes. I learned a lot, and like there was so much I didn't know.
Right now, can I ask you a follow-up question, which and also admit that I do come from the land of history. So I apologize for springing that on you after asking you about historical mistakes. But I know nothing about the medieval period. I didn't study that. But the things that you learned, I'm thinking especially of like not having forks. Did that affect writing the romance for you? Because I feel like, especially because like, having written, fantasy romances, that sort of thing, like there is sort of a way that we like to think of them and very clean, for example, and like having private space, to go off and do their thing. So did your storytelling or your perspective on that have to shift a little bit?
If there are probably two elements of the story that are, if we're really like digging down into it, are anachronistically modern. And that's, first of all, the dialogue. No one is actually speaking like we do back then. But it felt really important to me to make the dialogue feel easy and accessible. And, they're not using modern slang, but they're also not like talking in like thee, thy, thou, or whatever, or Old English or Middle English, But the other piece, so it's interesting, like thinking especially about like a queer love story, right? Like the construction of sexual identity, it wasn't the same back then, like there wasn't like this identity of queerness or being gay in the same way that like it's so that we sort of have as like both a gender identity and a sexual orientation and a social construct and a social community around these identities, right? Like there are so many layers to that just were not a part of the medieval schema, right? So I wanted to sort of bring that more of a contemporary, that I'm bringing more of a contemporary sort of treatment of that, where they do, the characters are sort of grappling with their feelings and wondering, what does this mean in a society that like has sort of a strict conservative moral code, I guess, around or expectations, let's say, around a man and a woman being a couple. And so if you exist outside that, what does that look like? What does that mean? And then what does a love story within all of that look like? So that was sort of all in the background as I was writing the story, but like at the same time, like the emotions of love and like the human experience that like even in the source texts, you see these characters falling in love, and you see their infatuation and their emotional pain and their grief, and all of these things are what sort of shrink the time, right? That bring us close to these characters and shrink the gap between us and them. And so I did sort of want to, tap into that sort of universal love story, right? Like those beats are going to still be authentic to kind of both the source material, but also for a modern reader. That was kind of the balance that I was trying to strike.
Yeah. And it's hard because one of the reasons I went into history in the first place eons ago now was that it is this wonderful exercise in compassion, right? And in putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and in recognizing these similarities. But at the same time, I think it's a archaeologist, of course, I don't remember who, but somebody large in the field once said, the past is a different country. We don't know how they do things there.
Totally.
So yeah, there's a lot of room.
A lot of
right?
room. I mean, yeah, like, even, like, gosh, like, some of the hardest parts for this book for me were, the slow burn element was challenging, but, like, the sex scenes were incredibly hard for me to write. I'm not naturally good at those, I've learned in the process of this. And it also felt sort of, impossible to really know if, like, what I was creating was in any way historically accurate. I don't know. But
sure.
like,
yeah.
But like the goal, I guess, in those scenes, they're essential because they do, they really need to reveal depths and dimensions of a character and a couple and their connection. And so, you have to get those right, is how I felt. But gosh, it was hard. The romance was hard. It was really hard. Hard to write.
But also, like, it sounds like that kind of the thing that kept you going and, like, the thing that attracted you to the story in the first place.
Totally, because it also in some ways is this the element of the story that, like, everyone can relate to, even if it's not romantic love, everyone has felt, those deep feelings before, a deep sense of connection or longing or grief. These are sort of tentpole human emotions that, like, you can really, like, you can connect and sort of bond over.
Absolutely. I love that. All right. We're gonna return to being on track. First of all, so you've got your memoir out, you've got this book coming out soon. What is next for you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, maybe I should ask the psychic, because she clearly...
Yeah, you should.
She clearly knows. But honestly, like, I'm just trying. So the book comes out. It'll probably be out by the time this podcast is up. It's out now, I guess.
Yeah.
But
welcome to the future.
Welcome to the future. But I'm doing a bunch of events for the book this summer, and I've got sort of two ideas right now that I'm playing around with in my mind and kind of testing out the proof of concept, and I'm still trying to decide, like, which one of the two am I gonna commit to. But so that's sort of where I am on the writing front. But I'm also, for my day job, I'm an editorial director at an imprint of HarperCollins, and so that keeps me very busy, and we've got a lot of awesome books coming out soon, and scheduled out even further into next year and the year after. So writing is something that I do in the early hours before work or on weekends, but we've got a lot of exciting books that we're publishing too. So
awesome. Ooh, very cool. And I guess that's good, right? Because if this book grew out of you being able to tell yourself no one's ever going to see it, then it's probably good to not make any promises now about what next book you're going to write.
Exactly.
You
I
can
think
keep it to yourself at least.
I think I need to keep it to myself a little longer, just until I have a better sense of, first of all, which one of these two ideas I'm going with, and also, like, where's the heart of the story. So
fair. Yeah. Nice. Okay. And I was like, that sounds so lovely and so professional, which is great, because my next question is one that I ask everybody. But what advice would you give to yourself if you could go back and talk to yourself when you were just starting out, maybe just starting out publishing or just starting out with this book, whatever? What would you say?
Well, I mean, first of all, and my memoir was about this, sort of being a little bit of a late bloomer in coming out. So I probably would tell myself, first and foremost, hey, guess what? You're gay. Like, maybe you should, like, hello. Like,
personal revelations. Good.
Yeah, look at all that Britney Spears you've loaded onto your iPod. What about that? Might want to dig into that. So, like, all right, but that aside, I feel like
know thyself. Like, it's good advice.
Know thyself. Okay, we'll go with we'll frame it like that. But I would also like I wish I would tell myself to be kinder to myself, right? Like I feel like and this is advice that I still should take. It's very easy to let that negative voice in my head sort of take over and get really loud sometimes. And I think that, like, I look back, in my younger years, it's like, why was I so hard on myself? I could have extended more compassion and grace and kindness to myself. So that would probably be my advice.
That's a good one. And I've said it before on the podcast, but I love this question specifically because I think that I always learn something from it. So yeah, even though it's authors talking about themselves, years ago, usually it's like, yeah, that's still relevant.
Well, I mean, not to flip it or put you on the spot, but like, how would you answer that question? Like, what advice would you, have you ever thought about it?
Every once in a while, yes. Every once in a while I have. But it's hard. I think that of all the things I could say, it does kind of boil down to the point that you're making also of just being so much kinder to myself. And like, I had always been writing, and that's forever been one of my outlets. But like, especially when I started publishing, the expectations that I put on myself were insane. And I'm still kind of untangling that. So yeah, I think that's like the perennial message is just give yourself a break.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it fits in so well with what you were saying about how you started, or, how you continued to work on the Lost Book of Lancelot. It just, when you kind of let some of the expectations and all the pressure fall away and just have fun, like, that's when creativity can really flourish.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. That's a lesson that I will absolutely be taking with me into any new book I write. That really, it's, it's gotta be something that, like, I'm excited about, that I find fun, and that I'm doing first and foremost just for the love of it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful. Okay. We will get to our last question in just a minute, but before we do, I will obviously have like your bio and your author website like in the show notes, but is there any way in particular you would like people to find you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram at Glynner85, Glynner 85. That's probably the best place. I'm also on TikTok at John Glynn Books, but I'm more often on Instagram.
Fair. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna end on a high note. Not that this interview hasn't been lovely and very fun, but what is one win that you've had in the past week? It could be anything.
Man, so the New York Times released their list of books to read in May, and they included Lancelot. They included the Lost Book of Lancelot on it, and that was just amazing to see my book in the New York Times, on a New York Times list.
Yeah,
it was truly, that was an awesome win. It was, if nothing else happens, like, I'm really I'm happy that I can point to that as a win.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm sure more good things will happen. But congratulations.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. And John, thank you for being here.
Yeah, this has been a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. For listeners, like I said, all that information will be in the show notes, so check that out. Check out The Lost Book of Lancelot, which should be live now. And I will talk to you next time.
Cozy Alchemy is brought to you by Authors on the Air, and our theme music is by Cyberwave Orchestra. For everything else, blame Elle. You can find her online at lhartford.com.